Hi there guys, I just wanted to make a quick video covering my DeathAdder V2 Pro that I recently picked up at a pretty good price because they aren't making these anymore. I think the only one, I think the classic DeathAdder shape, the only one you can really get now that they still manufacture is going to be that, what is it called? The HyperX version where it has the magnetic top plate that detaches, then you put the batteries in manually. I wanted to get, and then also the difference between that one is instead of having the DPI buttons here, they like moved them over on the top corner edge. But I wanted to get the Pro just because I really like the, the injected rubberized side grips, and versus the normal DeathAdder V2, this is pretty cool. And I like the way this feels a lot. Whether they'll wear down a lot over time though, I mean, who knows? I assume they probably will. But the grips on my wired DeathAdder V2 aren't this extensive, but they've kind of been fine, other than you can tell that, well, you can tell there's a little bit of wear on them, but they're fine, they're still there. So hopefully these hold up pretty well. So I bought this because since they're not really making the DeathAdder V2 anymore, like I couldn't even find, the only wired ones I could find that weren't like refurbished were off of eBay, effectively. And, you know, the price seems to be creeping up on them at this point, because in my experience, mice kind of go through this cycle where if they make a new one and they stop manufacturing the old one, then the prices crater on the old one for like a while, and then once they kind of sell out at places, then the prices skyrocket. And you can see that with like some of the old Naga mice, for example. But I bought this because, so I own a lot of mice. I have a big pile of my favorites over here, like the Outset, the EC1 and 2, and I have the DeathAdder V3 actually. I tried to get used to this mouse. I don't like the shape as much. That's the reality, as this. And I think it all comes down to the way you hold the mouse. So I think the DeathAdder V3 is actually more comfortable if you are going for a claw grip. I think for a claw grip, I prefer the V3. The thing is, I don't claw grip my mice. I don't do that. The way I hold them is a relaxed fingertip tilt grip, basically, I would describe it. So I have like 19.5 by 10.5 centimeter hands. My hands actually might be a bit wider than that. But I like to take this part of my fingers and I relax them down to the peak of the mouse hump, and I just kind of relax my hand down. And then I sort of tilt the mouse a little, because I find it makes your thumb go more in between the buttons, so it's easier to reach this one. But you don't have to hold it that way. You can more center it, and I still find this mouse pretty comfortable. I have noticed so I had my wired next to this one. The shapes are almost identical. I don't think they're perfectly identical though, because I'm finding where it sets your hand, there's something that seems slightly different about the mouse hump at the back, but overall it's quite a similar shape. And the clicks feel different because I think this one had the V2 opticals compared to the V1 on the wired version. The side buttons are good. I actually think the side buttons are better on my V3. And I like, so on the V3, they actually have this little, it's not just the button face, it has like a gentle curve into the button face that's rubberized, or it feels rubberized, and that's like, I think that's really cool. One thing I've noticed on a lot of mice, like this happened on the Superlight as well, is when you press this, especially the back side button, it tilts upwards into the shell. Right? So instead of just going in an even straight manner, it's like the top tilts into the shell and the bottom doesn't move. I don't like that. That's really annoying and it doesn't feel very good. I still think these buttons are pretty good, especially this one. The front one turned out really well. But I don't know. The back one does have that problem a little bit, and I almost feel like the one on my wired unit turned out better. I'm not sure why it is this way, but I noticed this with, because I have a wired and a wireless DeathAdder V3. There's like a lot of variance, weirdly, in terms of like how the clicks turn out and how the side buttons turn out. It seems like that shouldn't be a thing, but it is sometimes. Overall, I'm pretty happy with these. They didn't really fix the gripes I had with the default DeathAdder V2 on the Pro, but it's effectively the same mouse. So if you like the V2, you'll like this one. The reason I bought this is because I really hope they make like a classic version of this shape with the modern specs. I find, so what does this mouse do? What this mouse does better than other ergos, I think, is that it kind of, I find, sits your hand a little bit lower. Like the peak mouse hump height seems really tall to me, how it sets your hand on the EC1 and on the DeathAdder V3. And I think this mouse, it's harder to reach this furthest forward side button for me, but where it sets your hand down and then the width in the right direction. Like the way that the mouse hump is, it's just perfection to me. I think it's more comfortable than any other ergo I've tried, and I like the width. I like the way it wraps your hand around it. I just think it's, if you like this kind of grip and you have hands that are similar in size to me, I think this mouse is more comfortable than the EC1. I think it's more comfortable than the, you know, the DeathAdder V3. And that's why I bought it and why I'm using it. I do think you can tell in game, though, the DeathAdder V3 does have a better sensor, and it pulls at a much higher rate, and I think the wireless implementation is better. For a while, for a long time, I avoided wireless mice like the plague because they didn't feel right in video games. Like it always felt like there was a weird smoothing filter on what you were doing, and I'm not gonna call it like obvious latency, but it just didn't feel as direct as the wired version. I think there is maybe a really tiny amount with this. I think by the time this came out, wireless had gotten pretty good if you're using the attached like 2.4, you know, dongle that comes with it. It is a nice detail. I like that they actually put the name of the mouse on the dongle. That's pretty sweet. And then they have a slot for it to go on the bottom. And it comes with Bluetooth as well. I think that I don't have the charging dock. And it's funny, they got rid of this on the DeathAdder V3. But I don't really care about that. It's no big deal to me. But the main reason I got this is I just like the shape a lot. And I'm really sad that this mouse is dead, which is why I wanted a backup, basically. But yeah, I don't know. I'm really bummed about the DeathAdder V3. I tried for a long time to get used to it, and I think what the DeathAdder V3 does, which is really impressive, and what is better than any other mouse, the wireless implementation on my DeathAdder V3 is perfect. When you pull it like 2,000 or 4,000 hertz, I get zero camera jitter in game. I get effectively, like, I can't tell any smoothing, can't tell any latency. It's, you know, all of that is great on the DeathAdder V3. And I think it's good enough on this one. Like, it's good enough where I don't really notice it and I got used to it. But I do think that one is better on that front. And I think I can tell. Maybe it's a placebo, but I don't think so. And what I do to test that sometimes is I noticed on like my EC1-C, if I pull that at 1,000 hertz and I go into Overwatch or something, and then I set the frame rate cap really high, at like 140 on a 140 hertz G-Sync panel, and then I just pan the camera back and forth and track a distant vertical object, you can kind of see a little bit of camera jitter creep in there, and then it gets wildly worse if you pull at a lower rate. That's not too bad with this one, and it's non-existent with the V3, especially pulling at higher rates. So whether that's the sensor or the pulling rate, because the EC1-C does have a worse sensor, I can't really say, or maybe my EC1 is dying. That's possible as well. But I don't know, man. I really hope they I don't want them to abandon this shape. I find it really weird, right? Like, imagine if like Zowie said, oh, our EC2, we're moving in a new direction and we're gonna like overhaul and change the shape and just make a completely different mouse. That would be baffling, right? Because it's such a popular mouse that people love. Why would you do that? And there's this direction of travel where it's like every manufacturer is just copying Zowie's homework, but doing it worse. Like, I think the DeathAdder V3, I don't like it as much as the EC2. And the EC2 is not perfect. My main gripe with it is that I find that it's not wide enough in the rightmost direction to support my fingers how I want. And then on the EC2, I also don't really like the way they handle their finger ledge as much as on the Outset or the DeathAdder V2, because it kind of swoops in and then goes out into the rounded corner. I find when your fingers like rest really far forward, it feels kind of awkward on the EC2. I don't think that's true of the DeathAdder V2. This mouse has flaws. I've talked about them many times before. I think that this button is too far forward. I'd rather they rotate these buttons backwards along the hump a little bit, just so it's a little bit easier to reach both of them. And I also think my preference would be that they take this front part and they lengthen it out just a smidge, and then they use that extra distance to round off these corners, kind of like they do on the Outset, for example, like some of Vaxi mice. Because I think if you are somebody that happens to hold the mouse really far forward and your hands rest in that corner, fortunately for me, that doesn't really happen because the mouse is big enough that it doesn't really happen in my case. You know, hard edges feel like crap, and they didn't fix that on the V3 either. And I should reiterate, if you claw grip, and I think this is part of why the V3 reviewed so well, if you claw grip, V3 is a dream. I think the V3 and the Outset AX, if you claw grip, to me are probably the most comfortable mice. If you kind of palm grip or relaxed fingertip grip or relaxed fingertip tilt grip in the way that I do, DeathAdder V2 shape is the best. And I would say it's not even close. Not even close, really, because I was finding, okay, well, like the problem with the EC1 is kind of close-ish. It maybe even is the closest to being like the DeathAdder V2 shape, but it's not, because I find that where it places my hand down, it like feels like my fingers have to do this. Like it feels too tall, and I still don't feel like it supports my fingers wrapping around as well as this mouse does. And then the finger ledge portion, I think, is more comfortable in this, because I don't find it comfortable in the EC1 shape when my fingers, well, I shouldn't say I don't find it as comfortable when my fingers rest really far forward, because that swoop in and out part, it just feels awkward, a little bit awkward to me, which isn't true of the Outset either. The Outset has a great finger ledge, but also the Outset has a raised back and it sits your hand really high, and I don't find that comfortable. For long gaming sessions, or not as comfortable, I should say. But I would have liked if they shrunk this bar up and moved it forward. I think the EC mice definitely have, to my preference, a better wheel, but this is still a really good wheel. What the EC mice do that I really like on their, at least the modern ones that I really like about their wheel, is so I never mis-scroll. I never mis-scroll the wheel when I'm middle clicking on the EC mice, because you get these really chunky defined steps that feel like you're pressing a button, and it's awesome. I love it. It sounds kind of crude, and I think this, you could argue, is a better hybrid wheel that some people like, because it's fairly quiet and you still get the defined steps. I like this wheel more than the Naga wheel. The Naga wheel is too loose for me. I like this wheel more than the DeathAdder V3 wheel. The DeathAdder V3 wheel feels like flimsy and hollow to me, and the steps aren't as well defined, and I don't prefer it. I genuinely think this wheel was better on the last version of the mouse, which is weird. Yeah, and the other thing I noticed, the top shell on the base V2 is more textured than on the Pro. The Pro, it's maybe a little bit textured, but it feels very, very smooth now. I don't like that. It was better on the standard V2. I prefer the matte texturing of the shell. Some people don't, and I get that, again, if you claw, because like if you look at Zowie's kind of sticky, gluey, perfectly smooth coatings, what they do there, I think if you're clawing where you only have a few contact points, it's valuable to have it be really grippy. I like when you have a matte shell and you're holding it like this, it like feels breathable. I don't know, it's nice. I feel like I can throw it around better. I don't know, I don't like perfectly smooth, sticky plastic. It just feels cheap to me. The Superlight's still the goat on that front. Superlight has that rubberized soft touch material that feels like, what was it? Like the original OnePlus phone, I think, had a similar material to the Superlight, which is great, and I wish more mice would do that. But they don't, but there's not too much to talk about that's different than the standard DeathAdder V2. It's more or less that same mouse, just with way better side plates now, I would say, and it's wireless. And the wheel doesn't light up anymore, so that's true. I think I saw in the Arting's review they did for this mouse a while back that the latency was not perfect with the wired version, but it was very, very close. Like, it's so close that arguably many people won't notice. And you can always play with it wired as well, which is what I may have to do someday if the battery dies, because that's one of the things I don't like about, well, I wouldn't mind that lithium-ion batteries die eventually, except for they don't really make this mouse anymore. So I don't know. I can't get over that, man. Like, look at this box. They say 10 million sold, right? Like, the DeathAdder V2 is wildly popular. The G502 from Logitech, the Razer DeathAdder, and I mean, the Superlight's really popular at this point. Possibly the EC2 are extremely popular mice, and it boggles my mind that they would abandon this shape, because I don't think it's all hype. So many people, I watch reviews and I read reviews constantly for people that think, oh, the DeathAdder V2 is all hype, it's a bad shape, it's inferior to other things. I completely disagree. The only reason I think people say that is because either they are using a different type of grip than what I think this mouse excels at, which is something very specific. I agree, actually, with the notion that if you switch between your grip types all the time, or you use a different one from like a relaxed fingertip tilt grip, sure, those other mice are probably more comfortable. Or if your hands are not as wide, particularly if your hands are not as wide as mine, then those more narrow mice probably are more comfortable, and I completely get that. But I have tried for so long at this point to get used to these other mice. I can't do it. I always come back to my DeathAdder V2, always. And I don't know. I want them to keep making it. I just want, like, give me this shape, even if they don't fix the things that I've talked about a million times, in terms of the tweaks I would like for the mouse. Even if they don't fix those things, I just want this mouse with the DeathAdder V3's specs. That would be great. Also, I'm going to complain more about the DeathAdder V3. The wired version versus the white version of this mouse. So the white wireless version of this mouse has a different shell material and coating, or it feels different than the wired version. So the wired version has like an EC-like smooth plastic sticky coating type thing. I hate that. I think it feels cheap. I don't like it. The white version had that kind of chalky matte, well, maybe it wasn't matte, but it feels different. I think it feels better. I think it feels more premium. I wish they had gone with that. Maybe they're trying to keep costs down. The other thing that's a regression on this V3 wired version, and I think that probably the wire had to be different because it has to support those higher pulling rates. Maybe that's why it has to be thicker or something like that. My wired DeathAdder V2, though, has a great cable. So a lot of people don't care about wireless. I get it if you're using a mouse that has a good cable. So like the EC2-C has, I think, a great cable. The DeathAdder V2, that old SpeedFlex cable is awesome. Like you can fold it, you can do what you want with it. It stays out of your way, and I barely notice it. Outset AX had just a dog crap cable. It's like a stick, and I hate it. I'm trying to think. The DeathAdder V3, this mouse, I don't like the cable on this. I really don't. Like it's always twisted up, and even when I try to straighten them out, it like wants to fold in very awkward ways. I'm not a fan of the cable on this, so I don't think this is a bad mouse, and I'm probably giving the wrong impression. I think it's easier to reach the furthest forward side button, and I like how they do the thing on this mouse where they like have a angle that feels rubberized, where your finger slides onto the side button. In theory, I like the split trigger switches, but honestly, these clicks suck on my units. The right click turned out good. The left click turned out terrible on this one. And and then my white wired one, the clicks are fine, but then the backmost side button feels terrible. So it's like, I don't know what they're doing. I still think it's a good mouse, but the outset clicks are probably the best ones. They're mechanical in terms of like feel, but I really like them. And the EC2-C clicks are awesome. And then the EC2-C, EC1-C has my favorite wheel as well, but it's not really a good hybrid wheel because it's so notchy and clicky like a button. It's more of a dedicated gaming wheel, I'd say. This is a good hybrid wheel, but I don't know, man. Like, I don't claw grip, which is why I don't like this mouse. That's the reality. Bring this sucker back, please. Some people turn off the lighting, because they want to save power. I leave it on because I have different DPI profiles set up, which I don't use that often. But what I do is I just change this color so that I always know which profile it's on. And then the default one I use at like 1600 DPI, I have it on the base spectrum cycle and things like that. So this mouse is comfy. At least if your hands are sized like mine and if you prefer the grip style that I do. And I like these buttons, so they got rid of them on this one. My position is you could 100% fit a button in between these clicks here. You definitely could. And I think they should, because even if it adds like 1.5 grams or 2 grams of weight or something, maybe it's more than that, whatever. I like it because what I did was I rebound these from DPI switching, because I just used this to switch the profile and then that switches DPI for me. I rebound these to be like numpad star and numpad backslash or something, because those are bindable in game, and my keyboard does not have like a numpad anyway. So, and then you can put a map on these, or you can bind it to toggle mute in Discord or something, right? So it's pretty nice. But I don't know. I'm thinking I have spent a lot of money on mice over the years. I'm thinking I'm just gonna give up and ride this mouse into the ground, and then when this dies and my wired V2 dies, I don't know, I'm gonna figure some out to do at that point. But the dream would be that Razer gives us a DA Classic with updated internal specs. That would be the dream to me. And weight is not everything, right? So one of the things this mouse does that's cool is you get like a pseudo unibody shell. You don't really get that here, but I don't mind because I think these grips are cool. They feel nice. And then it's really lightweight. Like, obviously this mouse is much lighter. I think weight matters. I'm not going to claim it doesn't matter, right? Because I think it does. But it's not everything. I think a lot of mice these days are pursuing low weight so hard that they end up feeling hollow and flimsy and cheap. And they don't feel durable or tanky. Like the Outset AX feels like a tank. It's not the lightest mouse in the world, but I could throw it into a wall or drop it on the ground. Even if it would break, it doesn't feel like it would. I mean, it feels very tanky. I think the build quality on this mouse feels better to me than it does on my V3 unit. And again, maybe that's just variance off the line. I've seen reviews where they have seemingly no issues with the build quality on their DeathAdder V3s. But I don't know. My observation has been that, especially within the tech review community, it seems like tons of these people use a claw grip or a form of a claw grip or something to that nature. Like a lot of people, for example, like I think House Gaming Tech has said that he does like a claw grip where his finger rests on the top right corner and things like that. I wonder, so Razer wanted to unify their ergo line into one product. They wanted to, I think, not have the DeathAdder and then I'm blanking on the name, but they have another ergo mouse which has less pronounced curves. The Mamba, that's what it is, the Mamba. And I get that, but I would personally rather use my EC2 than my DeathAdder V3. Well, maybe that's not quite true, because I do prefer the finger ledge on this minus the hard edge corner, which kind of sucks. But the clicks and the clicks feel better on my EC2. The wheel I like better on my EC2. And I like the shape on the EC2 more, because despite being taller, the mouse width hump, like the hump width, is identical. It is identical if you go to the shape compare tools between this and the EC2. And the EC2, like left half, is perfection. It's just not wide enough to support my finger, so I like. So, I don't know. That's what I think. I like this mouse, and even though it's hard to reach that frontmost button, you still can if you tilt the mouse in your hand. And the nice thing about it is you can go right up to hit this one. So I find on the V3, I'm pretty sure. If your finger sits here, it is slightly less comfortable to reach that back button because you have to bend at the joint. But that is a preferable problem to have, because if you're sitting back here, you have to like shift your whole hand to go forward. So it's better to bend back than it is to shift forward for this grip type. And I think a lot of times, again, they're kind of focusing on a claw, because if you claw, it's super easy to reach either, especially on this shape. But I'm kind of repeating myself at this point, but I love the classic DeathAdder V2 shape. I think it's great, and I hope they bring it back. And these side grips feel awesome to me. So yeah, that's what I think, guys. Please bring it back, Razer, with updated specs. I will buy it. I really will. But anyway, guys, have a good one. Thanks for your time. Bye.